James and Ben here for OddsChecker. We got another UFC card going down this Saturday, UFC Vegas 68. Quick note on the start time. This one is starting at 10 p.m. Eastern time. If you remember, this card was supposed to be in South Korea. They moved it to Vegas, so a bit of a late one. It's a great card for you night owls out there. And we're going to look first at the, obviously, well, you can see it there. It's taking place at the Apex. And we're going to start first in the welterweight division, opening up the main card. We've got Adam Fuggitt taking on Yusaku, Kinoshita. And right now on OddsChecker, you can see Kinoshita a big favorite here, but minus 325, minus 340 around there. Who are you liking here, Ben?
I mean, for the odds, I'm not really sure I like to play. I mean, there's had maybe Kinoshita as a parlay piece, just because I think Fuggitt, he's the more hittable guy. He, of course, got knocked out in his UFC debut. It was a stoppage loss against, granted, a talented Michael Morales, but still, I just think Kinoshita, I mean, he at least looks like the better prospect in my eyes. He's minus 300 for a reason. I think a lot of these fights, especially based off the odds, are kind of setups on the card, and I think this might be one of those spots. So yeah, I'd say Kinoshita. I don't really have a strong lean either way.
Yeah, it's a tough read here. We got to mention Kinoshita making his UFC debut. There's always that, those UFC jitters, and we do see this every now and again. We'll see a fighter make their UFC debut and they end up losing. So just keep that in mind with Kinoshita. I think the line is way too high on this fight. I think Fuggitt, despite losing his debut, looked pretty decent against a good prospect of Michael Morales in that fight. And again, that was a late finish in that fight. I think Kinoshita will probably win. He's the bigger guy. He's younger. But I just don't see much value on him at minus 325 and a guy that really hasn't proven a whole lot. So we'll see how he looks on Saturday. No bet for me on this fight, but if I got to pick, I'm going to go Kinoshita to get it done, probably by decision in this fight. Okay, next we're going to go to the featherweight division. We've got Choi taking on Kyle Nelson, and you'll see Choi, the favorite on most books, almost 2-1, about minus 180. The comeback on the Canadian, Kyle Nelson, about plus 155. Who are you liking here, Ben?
Man, this one is tough. I don't like minus 190. I don't like the price. I might look for a prop. Choi, the reason I say it's so tough is, yeah, sure, like he should be the better fighter, but you got to think he hasn't fought in a long time. He's had a long layoff.
It's about 3 years. 2019 was his last
about
fight,
3 years, which, I mean, that's a crazy long layoff. You really never know what to expect. You expect that he's been training, kind of getting prepared for this fight, but still, that's a long time. Ring rust, that's definitely a factor here. And he's lost 3 fights in a row. He looked like a really good prospect. He won the Ultimate Fighter 23, and then he lost 3 in a row. Granted, they were kind of hard losses. Cub Swanson, that's a tough one. Jeremy Stevens, Charles Jourdain, that's a tough loss too. So they were against better opposition than Kyle Nelson, because Kyle Nelson does not look good coming into this fight. He's 1-4 in the UFC. You think if he loses one, might have his job on the line here. But like I said, minus 190 is scary for a guy with this long of a layoff. He'll probably win, but I'll probably end up looking for a prop. I would say knockout, considering that's pretty much how Choi's winning most of his fights. He doesn't really find submissions, and he hasn't gone to decisions a whole lot in the UFC. So I'll take Choi probably by knockout, but I'll see where the line ends up.
I got a prop for you in this fight. By the way, I completely agree with what you said. I see a lot of people comfortably picking Choi here, and I don't know, man. This seems like a bit of a trap because, like you mentioned, the 3-year layoff, the fact that he's taken a ton of damage in his career compared to Nelson. The only thing that's interesting here is Nelson moving back down to featherweight. He was kind of, from what I was told, and I did speak to him before this fight, was that they basically just offered him the fight, and he's like, sure, I'll take it. But Kyle was planning to stay at lightweight. If you remember, his last fight was against Jai Herbert at 155. He was planning on staying in that weight class. He was very comfortable there. He did get plenty of notice for this fight, so people worried about him, maybe getting knocked out early or him having a bad cut. His fiance is actually a nutritionist, so I think Kyle will be fine on the scales. Keep an eye out anyways, but I don't think the weight cut will be too bad for him, because we know that bad weight cuts usually lead to quicker knockouts here. There is a play I like, though, a prop. I like the over in this fight, the over 2.5. I've seen some books, we don't have it listed here, but I've seen some I'm sure it'll come up later, but I've seen some books have it as low as like I think it's like minus 150 or something like that. Just because of the fact, if you look at Nelson and Choi in terms of them getting finished, so I know, like, you look at Jourdain, Stevens, these were 2nd-round finishes, kind of on the edge of that over 2.5, so to speak, there a little bit. But these guys are world-class, Jourdain and Stevens. Kyle Nelson, I wouldn't really put him on that level. And conversely, for Kyle Nelson, if you look at him getting finished, it's later, right? This is the 3rd round finish from Billy Quarantillo, 3rd round stoppage loss by Matt Sales. Diego Ferreira, that was up a weight class as well, getting 2nd round. I think just because of the fact that, again, I don't think Nelson is someone that gets finished early. I know Nelson does have early finishes. I just don't see that happening here with Choi. I think the over 2.5 might be worth a stab. But other than that, I don't really see a play here. Like, I don't even think minus 180 is worth it for Choi, just because I don't know what he's going to look like. We've seen time and time again fighters come back after a layoff and not look very good. So that's a big red flag for me. But my pick will be Doo Ho Choi. I think he probably does end up getting the knockout. Maybe you go that route, that, the knockout as well. But I still think the over, just in case this fight does go the distance, your ass is saved there. So I think the over 2.5 is worth a stab there. Okay, next fight we're going to look at here is in the heavyweight division. We've got Marcin Tybura, Blagoy, Ivanov. Tybura, the favorite, minus 146, minus 145 around there. Who are you liking here, Ben?
Yeah, this is another interesting one because when I was looking at the odds, I was actually really surprised to see the fight to go the distance is minus 210. You don't see that very often on heavyweight fights, and I think that kind of speaks to, Ivanov, how durable he is. I mean, if you look at his fights, he has not been knocked out professionally in his career before, which is insane for a heavyweight. Not one time. He's fought in a lot of organizations as well. Bellator, he's even in PFL, he's in World Series of Fighting where he had the title for a while. Now he's in the UFC, never been knocked out. And he's fought hard hitters. He's fought Derrick Lewis and Augusto Sakai as well. Didn't get knocked out in those fights. Split decision losses, actually, pretty close losses for him. So, I mean, he's an interesting fighter that I don't know what his chin is made of. I don't know how he's this durable. And on the same side, Tybura, he's less durable, but he's still pretty durable. He hasn't been knocked out in a while. I believe like 7 or 8 fights. His last knockout was against Augusto Sakai. So another durable guy. I do think we might go to a decision here. I'm not going to lay minus 200 on a heavyweight fight to go to a decision. That seems like a silly bet. But if this fight does go to a decision, I have to think that I'm going to side with Tybura here because he's the more active striker and he's also the more accurate striker, which I do think is important. But both these guys, pretty slow prodders. They take time to work in the octagon. They kind of actually heat up as it goes on. So I just think Tybura is more built for the decision here just based off of his volume and accuracy. But interesting one in the heavyweight for sure.
Yeah, I like Tybura a lot here. He's been more active. He's fought better opposition overall, in my opinion. And, you look at Ivanov, like he had, one fight last year in May, and then he hadn't fought since 2020. He's getting up there in age. I know he's tough to finish, but I just think Tybura is the better fighter. Maybe I'll lay something on here, minus 146. That's not too bad. Because I think he beats Ivanov in every aspect of this fight. So I'll go Tybura, and kind of what you mentioned there with him, with Ivanov being so durable. Maybe you go Tybura by decision and have some fun with that and see what happens. Because you even look at Tybura. He's not, he has a couple stoppage losses, Walt Harris and Greg Hardy, but a lot of these better opponents like Romanov, Rothwell, Grisham, they're going the distance. So I could see that happening here too. So yeah, I'll go Tybura by decision. Okay. Co-main event, Da Jung, Devin Clark. Da Jung almost a 3-1 favorite here. Devin Clark plus 200 around there. Who are you liking here?
Yeah, coming into this fight, Jung, I do think he wins. Rightfully so, he's a favorite. I think this is a little bit of a setup from the UFC just because you see Devin Clark, I feel like he should have won his last fight. That seemed like a fight that's definitely winnable for him. Muzakhanov, he was in his 2nd fight in the UFC, and then he ended up coming out and getting a stoppage loss against him. I feel like I don't really see where his trajectory is going right now. He's 1-3 in his last 4. I don't really love what I'm seeing from him. Meanwhile, Jung, he is coming off that loss against Dustin Jacoby, but he's been on an excellent trajectory right now, and he's basically won every single fight up until his last loss, actually. So I don't necessarily blame Jung for that loss. I will say that draw against Sam Alvey, I didn't love that, but I do think overall he looks like the better prospect here. He has better power, and I do think he can find that stoppage win because Clark, you see in the UFC when he's losing, 6 of his 7 UFC losses have been by stoppage. 3 of them were by submission. 3 of them were by KO TKO. So I think Jung can get the fight here. To knock that juice down, I am going to take inside the distance, though, just because I'm not necessarily super comfortable laying minus 240. Maybe I'll parlay him with something else, but I like that inside the distance prop.
Yeah, I like Jung here as well. Not enough to lay the minus 240. I might look at that knockout prop as well because that's likely how he's going to win. But this just screams pass to me because I think even Devin Clark, look, I know he got finished in his last fight, but he still trains at a great team at Elevation Fight Team. He's got, again, he's fought some really good competition. Jan Blachowicz, like you look at the names that he's fought in the weight class, and I think even Mirzakhanov is a guy that is going to make some noise in that weight class too. I'm a little worried about this one. This does look like an obvious fight where it's like, yeah, Jung will probably win, but I think I'm probably just going to stay away from this one because I'm a bit more of a believer in Clark than some other people are. Okay, let's get to the main event here. Derrick Lewis, Sergey Spivak. Spivak, the favorite, almost 3-1 odds, minus 250. The comeback on Lewis, plus 190. Who you like in here in the main event?
This is an interesting one because I bet on Lewis the last 2 times he's fought, and of course he's lost both. So I feel like I'm not necessarily having great luck with Lewis, but I'm going to back him here again. I can't stand when I pass on him as an underdog and then he ends up getting a knockout win. I think he's always live as an underdog. I know he's lost 2 fights in a row, so that's tough, but he hasn't lost 3 fights in a row before. So maybe he's due for a win here. I do think it's a pretty good price on him. In a heavyweight fight like this, I do think whoever just lands first very hard. When you have 2 hard hitters like this, I mean, anyone's live for a knockout, especially at heavyweight. I like the price on him. Yes, Sergey probably looks better right now as the prospect. Lewis is probably on his way out, but he's still only 37. I mean, we've seen guys in heavyweight go a lot longer than that. Lewis is taking a lot of damage. So there are some red flags here, but I do think he still has the power to finish. If Spivak gets this to the ground, that's another story. But I mean, we saw like one of my favorite wins for Derrick Lewis when he was an underdog was against Curtis Blades. Curtis Blades shot in. Lewis hit the uppercut. He gets creative. Like he is a very creative striker. He can find ways to get you on the mat and unconscious, not on the mat wrestling, but unconscious. And I think he's always live for that knockout. So I'm going to take him here at this price.
Yeah, I was the same way. I was backing Lewis his last 2 fights. It's bit me here. I'm not going to make the same mistake in this fight. I think this is more a fade on Derrick Lewis than it is about how good Sergey Spivak is. You look at the age difference there, almost 9 years apart there. It's like the thing that I look at as well is just like what can Lewis offer at this point? Like he barely made it out of. We didn't even make it out of the first round against Sergey Pavlovich in his last fight. He got finished by Tai Tuivasa in a fight that I actually thought he was close to finishing Tai in that first round and ended up getting finished in the second. I just think it's too risky to take Lewis. I think the play here is the under 1.5. I think that's the way to go in this fight. You're not getting, crazy value on it, but I could see an early finisher. I think they're both going to go for broke here. Spivak's tough to finish. Like he has lost before by stoppage, but in general, he's a guy that I think, he's not as big of a power puncher as say like Spivak and these other guys, but he can get it done. He finished Greg Hardy, he finished Augusto Sakai. I think it's entirely possible we see another, finish in this fight. And this way, if you play the under, you also don't have to worry about who gets the knockout because someone's getting the finish here. It's just a question of who. And I think that's the way to go here. So I'm going to take Sergey Spivak by second round knockout to finish Derrick Lewis. And I think we're going to start to talk about Derrick Lewis heading towards retirement after losing this fight. That's what I think. I hope he can turn back the clock, but I just think Lewis at this point, I don't think he's anything close to the guy that fought Curtis Blades a few years ago, if I'm being honest. So.
I do have one more note. That under I love just for one reason because Derrick Lewis has been very verbal about how much he hates 5-round fights. He actually says that he wants like a 3-round main event, which is kind of funny. So I definitely agree with the go for broke thing. Like I think that's why he lost in the first round in his last fight. And you see those really early stoppages, not so much because he's a heavyweight, it's also that, but he just doesn't like to fight for a long time. He knows his cardio is bad, and it's almost like he's just too stubborn to fight longer. So under, I'd say take like under 3.5 and parlay that or something because there's no world where this gets this 4th round. And
oh yeah, of course, yeah, I agree. That's actually the play I would say. Yeah, because just in case, because I think the under is 1.5. If you go under 3, that'll hit no problem. Then you parlay that with someone else in the card. So, but I'm warning you guys, it's a tricky card to bet on for sure, as we've kind of talked about here today. So, for myself, for Ben, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back next week. We've got a really big card next Saturday, the UFC 284 pay-per-view. I can't wait for that one. So we'll be previewing that next week. I hope you guys have a great weekend and best of luck cashing those bets.